What's up guys, Perry from Rockville here, and today we're going to be going over the controls, inputs, and outputs for the RVA-M3 V2. So before we dive in, just a quick disclaimer, if you have the RVA-M3 V1, this will also apply to that amplifier because all we did was update the internals for the V2. So let's take a look at the amplifier now, starting with the power terminals here. This is what you would use to power your amplifier from your vehicle. So the 12 volt line here connects to the 12 volt of your battery. The remote line would run to the ignition of your vehicle, and the ground terminal can run to the metal chassis of your vehicle. If you need help with the exact wiring, we do have a video on that you can check out. In the middle we have the fuses, and if they were ever to burn out or break, we do include 3 extra fuses so you can replace them. After the fuses, we have the power and protect light to let us know the status of the amplifier. So if the protect light ever comes on, that means we'll have to make an adjustment on our amplifier, while the power light will stay lit to let us know that the amp is working and in good condition. On the other end here, we have 2 positive terminals and 2 negative terminals. The impedance of the amplifier is 1 ohm, and we added 2 positive and 2 negative terminals for more options in your setup. So for example, if we were trying to connect a 1 ohm subwoofer to the 1 ohm amplifier here, then all we'll need to do is use one of the positive terminals and one of the negative terminals and run that to the positive and negative terminals of that sub. However, we can also pair the amplifier with 2 2-ohm single voice coil subwoofers ran in parallel. And if you have those subwoofers in the same enclosure with 2 sets of positive and negative terminals, you can use both the positive and both the negative terminals on the amplifier and run it to both of those terminals for the sub. With those subwoofers ran in parallel, it will match the 1 ohm impedance for the amplifier, so that would be a perfect match. And again, you have plenty of options as long as your subwoofer has a final impedance of 1 ohm. But one thing to keep in mind is that you don't want the power to run over 1000 watts. Now jumping to the other side of the amplifier, you'll see we have these RCA inputs and outputs here. First, let's take a look at the bridge section. So we have 1 terminal that acts as an output and 1 terminal that acts as an input. So for example, let's say we wanted to bridge 2 RVA-M3s together. All we're gonna wanna do is take 1 RCA cable and plug one end into the RCA bridge out, then plug the other end into the RCA bridge in on the next amplifier. Next, we have the RCA line input, and this is what we would want to use to connect our head unit to the amplifier so we can integrate it into our setup. We'll dive deeper into that in just a minute. Next, we have the gain knob for the amplifier to set the level, and we actually have a great video on how to set the gain on your amplifier, so you can check that out if you need help. Next to that, we have a bass boost. If we want some extra low end, we can go anywhere from 0 dB to 12 dB. Next to that, we have the low pass filter and the subsonic high pass filter to set up the frequency range for our amp. So breaking it down one by one, we use the low pass filter to set up the low end of frequencies that we want to hear through the amp. So for example, if I were to set this to 150 Hertz, we would only be hearing everything from 100 Hertz and below and nothing above. And then we can use the subsonic high pass filter to cap off the high end that we hear through the amp. So for example, if I were to set this to about 30 Hertz, we would hear everything from 30 Hertz and below and nothing above. So using the low pass filter and the subsonic high pass filter together limits our frequency range. So with those 2 examples, if I set it from 30 Hertz on the subsonic high pass filter and the 150 Hertz on the low pass filter, that's the frequency range we would hear through the amp. Keep in mind, if you're using a sub that has a ported enclosure, you would want to tune the subsonic high pass filter to the tuning frequency of the enclosure. And to find out the tuning frequency of that enclosure, you would just want to check with the manufacturer or check the manual. Next, we have the phase knob here, and we can use this in case our subwoofer isn't synced up with the rest of our setup. So for example, if you're listening to music and you feel like the air is being pushed in instead of pushed out, you can try using the phase knob here so that it lines up with the rest of your setup. And lastly, we have the input for the bass remote knob. So for that, all you're gonna wanna do is take one end of your remote wire and plug that into this input. Then you'll wanna take the other end and plug it into this input here on the bass remote knob itself. And from here, you can use the bass remote knob to set up the level of your subwoofer from the front of your vehicle so you don't have to constantly come back to wherever your amplifier is to adjust. And it also has a clipping LED so you know if your amplifier is getting too loud and you need to adjust your bass. So hopefully this helped explain all of the controls, inputs, and outputs for the RVA-M3 V2. But of course, if you have any questions, comments, or concerns, feel free to reach out to our customer support team through phone or email. As always, I'm Perry from Rockville, and we'll see you guys next time.